Hey everybody, I just wanted to let you know that I will be leading Rudy Basso and Alex Basso from Game O'Clock, Celeste Conowich and Brittany Quintero from Venture Maidens, and Vegas Lancaster of many podcasts, including Have Spellbook Will Travel fame, through an amazing heist thanks to Scratchpad Publishing, who is letting us play Rodney Thompson's new RPG, Dusk City Outlaws, on Monday, March 13th. That's the day this podcast drops, at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on our Twitch channel. Again, we're going to be playing Dusk City Outlaws at 8:30 tonight, Monday, March 13th, on the Don't Split the Podcast Network Twitch channel. If you're listening to this after, don't worry. You can go to the Twitch channel and check it out. There's links on our website, don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com. Please come watch us play this amazing medieval fantasy heist RPG. It is going to be awesome. It's from one of the creators of 5th edition D&D and Lords of Waterdeep and the Star Wars Saga role-playing game, and now he works on Destiny, and Rodney Thompson is awesome, and this game is super fun. All right, let's start the show.
Hey everybody, it's Rudy Basso, the co-owner of Don't Split the Podcast Network. I would like to encourage you, lovely listener, to head on over to our website and give a listen to my show that I host with my brother called Game O'Clock. It is a video game retrospective, introspective, other spectives, all about the kind of games that we love. And to be honest, we love just about every game out there. Game O'Clock released every Thursday. It's fun, it's short, and hey, you'll probably learn something about video games.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. This week on the show, I'm talking with cartographer and game designer Cecil Howe about his career and how we can make better use of maps and mechanics for our games. He is an amazing cartographer who has done tons of work for Rob Schwab's Shadow of the Demon Lord. You will love his work, and he's got a lot of useful tools that can help us game masters. Let's jump right into my conversation with him. Okay, everybody, now I am here with Cecil Howe. Cecil, welcome to Tabletop Babble. It is awesome to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me a bunch. I'm excited.
You know, one listener / contributor / good friend of mine named Greg Blair has been looking forward to this for a long time. He's a big fan of yours, and he turned me on to your work, and I didn't realize that, I already had a bunch of products that you had done work on when he pointed it out. So why don't you tell the people out there who you are in the world of tabletop role-playing games and some of the things you've done?
Okay, I'm Cecil. I'm an illustrative cartographer. I've got some writing credits and a self-published thing, but mostly what I do is maps for Shadow of the Demon Lord. I work pretty much hand in hand with Rob Schwab on everything I do. We did the Demon Lord Kickstarter last year, and that opened up a gazillion adventures and books and stuff like that we've been cranking out once a week. I do almost all the maps for those. That's my big thing. Done maps for adventures he's written, and Ed Greenwood, and Rich Baker, and Colin McCumb, and just lots of people. Basically all through Demon Lord. It's been pretty cool.
Which is amazing. I mean, Rob Schwab does not work with, just based on the names you just listed, right? Doesn't work with people who aren't awesome, basically, because he is awesome, and you are awesome. So it is great to have you here. I've been looking at your maps. I have many products because I contributed to that Kickstarter, right? So I have many products that you have created maps for, and these maps are beautiful. They're amazing. If people haven't checked out any Shadow of the Demon Lord stuff, do you have a particular adventure or something you recommend they check out to get the best idea of your work?
So I'm relatively new to doing maps that are good enough to go in books. That's just been in the last year or two since I started working with Rob. I think I'm just now hitting my stride and bringing my artistic influences into the maps I do. So the one that I did the most recently for an upcoming Schwab book is probably the best. But if you're looking through the back catalog, I think the map of hell that I did for Exquisite Agony, that's pretty indicative of how I work. It's a huge full-page map of hell in the Shadow of the Demon Lord world that's meant to look like pieces of skin sewn together. It's super gross. Like when I was doing studies for it and thumbnails and stuff, I thought I was going to get sick a couple of times. But I think that one's a pretty good example of how I work and what I do.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, it's also pretty exemplary of Shadow of the Demon Lord, a map of hell that looks like it's made on human skin, certainly.
Absolutely.
Which is, I mean, I love this game. It is one of my favorite role-playing games out there. So people should check out the game. They should definitely check out this map, and they should, check out the core rulebook too to see some amazing examples of work. I'm excited to have you on because I want to talk about cartography and sort of demystifying cartography, because I think a lot of game masters and people who write adventures and stuff, there are people who are awesome at making maps. We hear all the time that people like Chris Perkins loves to draw his own maps for dungeons, for overland maps, for campaign settings that he's working on, that sort of thing. And that he's very particular because of that about various cartographers he works with. And then I talk to other game designers who have lots of credits who are like, I can't draw a map to save my life. And I feel like I definitely fall into that latter category, that I have a hard time drawing maps. I'm always looking for what's a good program that lets me map something and then also use it in case I want to maybe publish the adventure later on. So what are some very sort of basic things that if you want to jump into mapping just for yourself, maybe something you want to be able to show to your players at the table, what are some very basic things that game masters need to understand when they're making a dungeon map versus an overworld map?
Right. So, like you said, there's a plethora of programs out there that some are free, some are super expensive. Some of them are really easy to use. Some of them are not so easy to use. Nothing is ever going to beat a pencil and a piece of paper. That's the first thing. I think a lot of game masters get hung up on wanting their maps to look be on the paper exactly how they see it in their head. And even for artists, when we go to paint stuff or draw stuff, it doesn't ever work that easily. So just taking the stress of how the map is going to look to your players out of the picture and just being able to arrange the data of your dungeon, pencil and paper, that's going to be number one. But as a GM myself, I don't use maps. If my players are crawling through a dungeon and they want a map, they've got to map it themselves. If they find an overland map or the map of a city or a country or something in game, then I'll have something prepared for them. But that's also rarely something that I draw myself. So I draw maps minimum 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. So when it's game time, they got to do it themselves.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I love that piece of advice about turning to the pencil and paper, because I think for me, I am in that camp, right? I'm I want this map to look good. And then when I find a mapping program that I'm using, I get into the space of it can't do what I want it to do. I want to draw a line this particular way. Or, I want an icon that represents this, and there is no icon that represents a capital city or whatever it is, right?
With those mapping programs, you're limiting yourself more than you are if you're just using, pencil and paper. If you're using those mapping programs, unless it's a super robust program with I think Campaign Cartographer is one of the programs that's been around forever. Comes with everything. It's like a kitchen sink program. So if you might be able to use that one and find exactly what you need, but when you've got in your adventure or your area in your head pretty hard, exactly how you want it to be, I think the pencil and paper is going to be the only way you can make it look just like you want it to.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the same way, particularly if you're writing an adventure, right? Again, be it for publication or for home, you're man, this blank page is full of possibilities, right? I can do whatever I want. And as long as there's a word for me to describe what I want to do, I can create it. And I think you have the same flexibility then when you go at something with pencil and paper or a program that has everything in it, you know? So how do you start then with your maps? When you're sitting down to draw a map for Demon Lord, what's your starting point? Do you decide like what it should look like? You know, like we were talking about human skin, like do you decide on the style of map first? Is that where we go? How do you do it?
It depends. So I've known Schwab longer than I've been doing maps professionally. If you've ever listened to Rob talk on your podcast or any other podcaster in person, he always talks about his watering hole. I worked there. I was bartending there, and that's how I met Rob. Awesome. So Rob and I kind of had like a friendly relationship before I started doing maps for him. So for Demon Lord, Rob, he sends me, he's like, here's an art order. I need a map for this. And sometimes, like, if he's not the one who wrote the adventure, there'll maybe be a map sketch or something like that. But with Rob, like, he and I know each other pretty well. He just tells me what he wants and gives me, like, free reign. And from there, I'll read the whole adventure. He's got small adventures and then bigger books. I'll read the whole thing, and then I'll kind of decide how I want it to look. If I've got questions or something, I'll talk to Rob and be like, you know, how do you kind of want it to look? Like the skin map. He was like, I want it to look like skin. Blech. So I was like, you got it, dude. But a lot of times I'll decide the color palette I want to use first based on the adventure. And then I'll decide how I want the border of the map to look. And then from there, I'll start sketching out the bits and the pieces and the interior. But yeah, the process is different for each adventure and writing thing, depending on what's going on in it. If it's a dungeon, I'll start with squares, you know, and just kind of map out the rooms on a spare sheet of paper or something like that, and start arranging squares and rooms. If it's an overland map, if it's got mountains, the first thing I do is like spend 2 days sketching mountains because mountains suck. So
wait. Why do mountains suck?
So if you're looking at like traditional role-playing game maps, you know, they're just triangles with like a line through the center and half of it's dark and half of it's white. That's not good enough for me. There's got to be a little bit more detail, but I also don't want to do like topographic mountains where you're looking down and it's just like looks like a squiggly line where one side is white and one side is black, you know, for the shadow. So what I'll do is I'll just decide how I want this mountain to look, and then I'll just sketch it over and over and over again. I work with traditional mediums, like every map that I've done in the past year, 2 years, 3 years. I do everything on paper with paint and crayons and markers and stuff like that, and ink, and then I scan it. So sketching mountains for 2 days keeps me from redoing a map if I screw a mountain up.
Wow, that sounds like a super detailed process. So you do that for every single map that you do?
Yep.
And if you mess something up, you have to like go back and redo that in the process? Or like at what point are you like, there can be no more revisions to this?
Sometimes like it just happens pretty quick, and sometimes it doesn't happen so quick, and I redo stuff. I do use GIMP, which is a free image editing software that everyone who's into games should learn how to use. I use that to do some color correcting and stuff like that. And if it's small mistakes, which mountains are never small mistakes, those are always big mistakes. But small mistakes I can fix pretty easily by redoing that feature on another, you know, piece of paper or canvas, and then just scanning that and doing some computer magic to it. But for the most part, if I mess up halfway through the map, then I'll just start over. It's when I start getting like huge washes of color and texture in that I'm like, all right, slow down, don't screw this up.
So if we're talking about maps, right, and we're talking about amateurs going ahead and trying to make our own maps for dungeons and that sort of thing, what are some sort of like basic tips that you would give to somebody like me if I'm like, look, I just want to make something and I want to make something quick, but I need to map out this dungeon to help me keep things straight as the players are going through it. Like what's something real basic that you would say? Pencil, paper, right? I've got that. I've got my graph paper ready to go. Is there anything that can help me speed up the process?
Like if you just want to do a map that your like players aren't going to see, just something for you to mentally arrange what's going on in your dungeon or your adventure, I recommend throwing out things like scale, like get rid of it, don't use it. Just do boxes, almost like mind mapping. You just do like a flowchart almost box, little squares with lines that connect to the next square, stuff like that. If you just want to arrange something, if you're getting a little bit more in depth with it, if you do want to show your players the map, I would go, squares on graph paper still, but a lot of people sweat the minutia. Like they want their maps to have a scale and be in scale. Everything's got to match up and make sense mathematically. Throw that stuff out the window. Just draw pretty pictures, or useful pictures even.
Yeah.
They don't even have to be pretty.
That idea of like, if the players aren't going to know it about the NPC, why write that long backstory, right? Why write all this information the players aren't going to know? It also holds to maps, right? Like, you just need what you need to get through the dungeon. And that is really, really smart, because I think that, I get obsessed with that stuff, and I'm like, oh, this should be 10 feet, not 5 feet. This square is, and it's like, who cares?
Definitely just throw that stuff out. Absolutely.
Exactly. Have you ever played on a virtual tabletop like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or anything?
Yep, I've never used Fantasy Grounds. I use Roll20. I definitely used it the wrong way. But I'm on a Slack team with a lot of people who sell art packs and map tiles and stuff like that on Roll20.
Oh, sure. And that's a great community.
Yeah, I always feel kind of like a dum-dum in there, though, because we'll talk about like who's using whose packs, and I'm always like, yeah, I'm not doing that, because what I'll do is, if I'm even using a map on Roll20, I just drag it in there, I still don't bother with scale or snapping to the grid or anything like that. I'm definitely like more of a theater of mind role-playing gamer. Mm-hmm. So I never worry about scales and details like that. It's too much stress. When you're youngin' and you're like, man, I want to do role-playing games for a living, and so you're looking up stuff other writers have written about, how to get into the business or how to write adventures, and they're like, throw out the World Bible, you don't need the kitchen sink thing. It's the exact same thing for maps. A really good map that players are going to see, or like if you're doing a map professionally that customers are going to see, the main goal is to excite people. I think a great map is one that someone looks at and they say, like, I want to live there, or I want to play there. A great map can be looked at, for data and detail, but most good maps are going to be exciting, like imaginatively. I think that should be the first goal with maps.
So exciting imaginatively, how? Like, should it be something we've never seen before? Like what's the best way to get inspired, and what are some examples of maps that you think are great as far as their imaginative qualities go?
My favorite maps, a lot of them, they look like in-game. Like I could rip them out of the book and give them to my players. Like a dungeon map's not going to have a dungeon grid on it, and it's not going to have like a table in a square. It's probably not even going to have a table in it, because if someone was rushing through that dungeon, mapping it so they didn't get lost, they're probably not going to care about the table. They're going to care about like what side of the wall the door is on, stuff like that. If I can like put my head in the head of the person who mapped it, those are the best maps. I also like maps just like from an artistic standpoint. I like maps that don't look traditional. There's a guy named Arlen Ortiz who does maps, and he does them on risograph prints. So he uses really cool muted colors and like buildings and mountains and trees and stuff that look fabricated, but they're not exactly prefabricated. I love his maps. When I play on Roll20, I use his maps instead of my own, because they're just like pretty to look at.
That's awesome. His name again is?
Arlen Ortiz. His last name is spelled Ortiz.
Awesome. We will link to him in the show notes on our website for this podcast too, as well as to all of the work that you're doing, which is amazing. And we'll definitely talk about where people can find all of that stuff as well, because they should go check it out, because these are some amazing maps. Hey everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know about this week's sponsor, Audible.com. Audible is offering the listeners of Tabletop Babble a free 30-day trial to check out their service, plus a free audiobook. Audible is pretty awesome. It is a great way to listen to books. If you're listening to podcasts, you'll probably love what Audible has to offer. I recommend checking out Deathmark. It is a Dungeons & Dragons Dark Sun book by the one and only Rob J. Schwab, who features heavily in my discussion with Cecil today. For your free audiobook, go to audibletrial.com/DSPN. That's audibletrial.com/DSPN. All right, let's get back to my conversation with Cecil. Somebody who's like me, right? Let's say you're a game designer out there, and you're working with a cartographer. What are some good things that we can do as adventure designers who are working hand in hand with cartographers? How can we make your lives easier and also, sort of collaborate to get the best possible product?
Definitely, like, if you want to give an art order to a cartographer, look up how a good art order is written. I've gotten art orders that were terrible, where I spent more time asking questions from the person commissioning the map than I did working on the map. And then I get art orders from someone like Schwab or someone else who's been in the industry for a while, and they have exactly what I need, the size, what they need in the map, special details if there are any, and then how much they're going to pay me. And those are the best. But the thing that gets hung up the most is words on the map, misspelled things in the art order, or not choosing fonts and things like that. I did some commissions earlier this year, at the end of last year or so, where the person commissioning it kept change. Every time I asked a question about the words that he wanted on the map, he would change them, and that's not good. Know exactly what you want going into it, and be as descriptive as you can to keep confusion down.
Yeah, it also saves you money then if you're fronting the money to pay for a cartographer. It's not easy work. You heard what he has to go through, right?
I'm definitely different than most. Like most cartographers, there's not a whole lot out there now doing it in traditional mediums.
So why is it that you feel the need, right? Like, why aren't you turning to, I don't know, Photoshop, right, to color your stuff? Or forgive my ignorance too if I'm using the wrong program names. I'm sure I am. But why aren't you turning to computers? And obviously the results are there. Like, these are beautiful maps. When you talk about working with crayons and paint and all these other things, like, they look amazing. They look handmade, which is really, really great. And then sometimes, you'll open up some other stuff and it's obvious that it was made using a machine. And not that there's anything wrong with that approach either, but like, why is it that you take this more handmade approach?
I don't know. I don't see a single thing wrong with maps being made in Photoshop. Like, I don't really know what programs they use either. I don't own like a fancy drawing tablet or like I wouldn't even know how to use a drawing tablet. And that might be why I still use crayons and stuff. But I want my maps to look in game, I think. And that's why I use traditional mediums. There are drawbacks to using traditional mediums though. Like, eventually I'm going to have to upgrade, because the way the industry is moving, the way that people who play games want maps, is they want like hyper detailed maps that they can zoom into, like just keep zooming in until they can see, like, I don't know, ants walking around on the ground of the map. And that's a benefit that digital work has. You can work with vectors and fancy computer stuff I don't understand to get that hyper detail through zooming, especially with the rise of virtual tabletops. Yeah, so I'm going to have to upgrade. I'm going to have to learn how to do that, or I'm going to be replaced. But for now, the creative process is more important to me, almost more important to me than the product. And getting my hands dirty, getting in there with erasing and sketching and doing color swatches and getting my desk messy. It's a great creative process. So doing it by hand with traditional mediums just makes me feel better. But I don't think it's any better or worse than, like, there's digital maps that I love too,
Sure. Yeah. And I agree. I totally agree. As a person who plays most of my own games on Roll20, I totally get the ease of digital. I actually input some of the Wizards of the Coast adventures into Roll20 for Roll20, and man, it's great to have that layered Photoshop document so that you can strip things off and put them on layers. You know, the traps are on a different layer that the players can't see, and all that kind of stuff. So it makes it very, very easy. But I do just love the way your maps look, and you're sort of taking a step into the digital world, right? You just had a successful Kickstarter wrap up. At the time we're recording this, it's actually still going on, but you've more than doubled your initial funding goal, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
The Hex Kit, which is this awesome project. Why don't you talk about the Hex Kit for a little bit, and then, like, what was your inspiration for it? And these are amazing hand-drawn hexes that are featured in the Kickstarter video. They are incredible. So let's talk about the Hex Kit a little bit.
Sure. Last spring 2016, I was at a hobbyist, like an arts and crafts store with my wife, and I found this stamp that it was like just like an old rubber stamp, but it had 42 hexagons. That was the stamp. It's like, why is this even a stamp? Like, who's stamping honeycomb stuff, on their stationery? So I picked it up thinking like, oh, I can use this to make cool hex maps, for Roll20. I could just stamp it, sketch it out, scan it, drag it into Roll20. So that was like the very start of Hex Kit. I did a couple of Hex Kit or like hex maps on watercolor paper and thought they were pretty cool. Shared them around the internet and people seemed to like them. Dyson Logos owns those now. I sent those, the very, very first Hex Kit stuff he owns. They're on his wall in Canada somewhere. Yeah, so like my cartography, like freelancing started to pick up, and I quit my job around the beginning of spring last year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I wanted to do something to sort of like floor my income for just in case the cartography stuff started to die down. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to make a bunch of hex tiles with this stamp. And that's what I did over the course of spring and summer last year. I made something like 1,300 different like hex map tiles, released those into the wild on Drive-Thru and Roll20, and it was really well received. It paid my rent for a few months. It was really cool. And the biggest complaint was that you had to use Photoshop or GIMP or something like that to assemble your maps if you weren't using it in Roll20. So back in December, I got a hold of a friend of mine who's a software developer, and I was like, "Hey, let's make a HexKit mapping program." And he said, "Okay." And then about a week later, he had a working tech demo. Pretty quick. Yeah. It just like he asked me to send him a software proposal, and so I looked up how to do that and wrote one and sent it to him. And I guess like my vision of what the program should look like and function like matched up with his, and it just worked out. And so me and him, Ross Squires is his name, and another gentleman named Pierre, whose last name is French Canadian and I can't pronounce it, Lafreri, something like that. I don't know. He's a super cool dude too. We've just been cranking this out. I've been just cranking out more and more hex tiles, all hand done. They've been tippity typing away and building the software, and it came together pretty quick, and we launched the Kickstarter, and it was really successful. But yeah, the whole thing basically just stemmed from me wanting to floor my income with like a really cool art project at the same time, because it's thousands and thousands of unique tiles. So it's been a fun art project, and the software is shaping up real well. The Kickstarter was successful. It's been a super fun project.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really, really, really cool thing. So everybody who's gotten in on this, congratulations. Can people get in on it if they missed the Kickstarter? So
with the Kickstarter, Kickstarter's kind of turned into a sort of pre-order thing.
Yeah.
The role-playing game industry it moves on Kickstarter now, which is great. I think it's great. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'm kickstarting HexKit so that I can pay the engineers back for the time they've put in already. because they've been cranking out the software since December and I haven't been paying them, you know. It was like they agreed to get paid through Kickstarter, which is really cool. Like if you can find someone to work with who's like believes in the product enough that they can gamble on a successful Kickstarter, then, you know, that's awesome. So we're offering HexKit a little bit cheaper than it will be when it releases, but you'll be able to get HexKit after the Kickstarter for sure. We've roadmapped it out. We've got, you know, our set of features that we want to be in it for 1.0, which will be out in April. And then the Kickstarter's been successful enough that we're definitely planning on supporting it as long as people are interested in it.
That's really, really great. So you made the leap. You're doing this full time now, which is awesome and not an easy thing to do, right?
No.
So how?
No.
Do you have any advice out there? Because I think a lot of people who play role-playing games and are deep enough into role-playing games to listen to this podcast, that's probably at some point crossed their mind, like, I could freelance in this industry. I could do this. What advice do you have for people who might want to freelance full-time in the role-playing game industry?
Don't be a one-trick pony. That's my biggest thing is don't just do maps. Don't just do art. If you can write or edit or do graphic design and layout, have a portfolio of skills. It's completely financially impossible unless you can do other stuff, at least in my experience. But I will say that there's a lot of people and a lot of advice out there for how to break into the industry, and don't try to break into the industry. Carve your place out of the industry. That's the biggest thing. I'm one of the few cartographers doing things in traditional mediums that does it full time, and I think that's because I have a pretty unique style. But I've got some writing credits through Demon Lord. I self-published a game last year. Being able to do other stuff definitely helps.
And I do want to talk about your design experience as well. Beyond cartography, you also write games and you write adventures and stuff like that. Did you fall into that sort of the same way? Were you making maps and Schwalb was like, hey, you want to write an adventure? Was that kind of the idea, or was it the other way around?
Sort of. Like, it definitely started with maps. He was coming into the bar, we were drinking together, and it's like, oh, you like role-playing games? I like role-playing games. Oh, you do that for a living? I'm your bartender. That's lame. But he had seen some maps that I had done and asked me to do. I didn't do the maps in the core Demon Lord book. I did playtest Demon Lord. Rob co-opted my role-playing group we disbanded our group to go play Demon Lord. But just through, getting to know Rob, he offered, the mapping gig. And then he was like, hey, if you want to write something, give it a go. I did toy around with writing stuff. I have a blog, things like that, before I was like, all right, I'll tackle something professional. And the first professional design work that I did was for the Demon Lord item book. And that was like a big eye opener. And then I recently finished up another writing gig for Schwab. That was an even big eye opener. The writing and the designing doesn't come as naturally to me, I think, as the mapping. I did design a game last year that is super bleak, and it's been decently received. It's sold really well on drive-thru. I guess if that's an indication of success, then it's been successful.
Shout out the name. What is it?
It's called Do Not Let Us Die in the Dark Night of This Cold Winter.
I know, it's so amazing.
Yeah, and it's a resource management mini game. It should theoretically fit into any grimdark role-playing game. There's a village somewhere that's really far away from anything useful, and they're in the throes of the worst winter of all time. And the adventuring party's got to collect and manage supplies to keep as many villagers alive as possible. And it's really bleak. When I do see feedback from that game, people are like, yeah, man, that's depressing. So, yeah.
But that's good. I mean, it's not good that it's depressing, but it is good that you have created essentially what is a little modular thing that you can either play as a mini game, right? You could sit down and play it on game night with your friends and the kids because it's super bleak. Kids love super bleak. Or you could drop it into a role-playing game, which is really awesome. I mean, again, this is no small feat. I know you said you don't think design of game mechanics comes as easily to you, but like to invent a mini game that can sort of be dropped in with the intent of like, yeah, you can drop this into your, whatever game you're playing, as long as you have a scenario that sort of fits that idea, you can drop it in, is really, really cool. How did the mechanics work for this game?
It's like half rules, like half mechanics for the supply gathering, and then the other half is abstraction to make it work with those games. The abstraction comes from basically generalizing role-playing games. I have this theory, like when you read fortune cookies or like look at horoscopes or whatever, you're like, yep, this works no matter what it is. Just your brain says, yes, this is how it is.
Right.
I have this theory that with role-playing games, there's only 3 classes or 3 types of players: fighter, wizard, thief, right? Classic trio of skills. And no matter what game you're playing, you could take any named character class, any set of skills from any role-playing game, and decide if your character is a fighter, a wizard, or a thief. The theory works the same way as fortune cookies, like easily disproved. But also, if you're thinking about it, it's like it's right. So in Cold Winter is what I call it for short. You basically decide if your character is a wizard, a fighter, or a thief, and then you get bonuses to your supply gathering through that. So classes are abstracted that way, and then turns and time are abstracted. So like you decide how long the winter is going to be, and then the supplies you gather are the exact amount you need for that amount of time. It's like really simple. The last thing I wrote for Rob Schwab for Demon Lord took me months to just get like 3,000 words, just like constantly battling myself like, oh, I suck at this. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, this is great, but now it's too many words. Cold Winter I wrote in a day, the first draft. It's weird. It's like really simple.
Well, that's cool. And it usually means like, yeah, this was inside you and you had to get it out and you had to get it on paper, And I love this idea of, you can break down classes or roles or careers or whatever they are in every game to these 3 core things. And I think when you get at that basic level, that's a great way to design these modular things that you can drop into role-playing games. You can think about those core roles that people have and then say, and if somebody's like a magic using fighter, it's like, cool, well, which one are you more of, right? Are you more wizardy or are you more fighter-y, and see what works with the minigame and go from there. So, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, the biggest question I got from that is just always people are like, well, what does the cleric count as? And I wanted to write in the game that if your character is a cleric, you get no bonus because the winter is just like so terrible there couldn't possibly be a god. But in the end, I was like, they're a magic user. So
totally, that's their main form. Like in pretty much every game, right? If you have a guy casting spells, be it holy fire or arcane fire, they're casting a spell. They're using magic. So take the 3 character class theory with a total grain of salt. Like I said, it's crap if you actually think about it. It's just an easy way to look at things. And it's a way to make the game easier to play. It's there to help, not there to make you scratch your head. And you're not trying to make some like grand statement around role-playing games. You're just trying to get people to play, which is cool.
Yeah, I like making stuff that's sort of new and different. Like my favorite role-playing games outside of Demon Lord, I love the old school world. Basic Expert Edition. That's my jam. But I do really like innovation, and so Cold Winter was like an experiment in doing something that hadn't really been done. Not that I could find anywhere. I don't know if I'm going to be doing any more mini games. There are 3 sequels to Cold Winter coming out eventually. They're not all going to be mini games and stuff like that, but they're all going to have like really pretentious long names like that one.
Do you know what those long names are yet?
The next book will be about spring. It's going to be spring themed, and it's going to be about factions, and it's going to be called, so I'm going to try to make it so that the titles all string together to make one long pretentious sentence. So it'll be something about like, and in, what did I say? And in the spring when the flowers are new, we will rise up, and it'll be like a collection of factions that you can throw into your game with an expanded like faction tracker that I designed a while ago. So yeah, that's the next one. And the summer book is going to be just like a giant book of maps. I don't know about fall yet. Fall's the mystery. Like, I don't know. I wanted to do something sort of like harvesty and like festival themed, but I don't know. We'll see on that one.
I can't wait for those to come out. That's really, really fun, and it's going to be great. I love that theme of, like, they're all connecting together into one giant long sentence, and it's going to be a lot of fun for people to check out. So, you are having a lot of success, and you deserve all of it because you are working so hard. How do you find time? I think that would be the other thing, right? You were working another job, and then eventually you went full-time, and then you said, like, you're probably working at least 48 hours a week. How do you find the time to do all of this stuff? Because I know, like, you've mentioned that, like, you have friends and a family and that kind of stuff too. So how do you make all that work?
I just like don't play games anymore, basically. Once you start making games and working in games pretty hard, then if you don't like make time to sit down and play games, then like that's the first thing that goes in the time budget. Like, oh, that's goofing off. No time for that. Got to make this stuff for other people to goof off with. But there's time, you just like drink a lot of coffee, get the minimum amount of sleep you need, and there's plenty of time.
It's not easy. It's not easy, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty good at time management. There's just not enough time. There's not enough hours in the day, like I'll wake up and do breakfast. And since I do this full time now, I'm at home with my daughter. Like, I'm basically a stay-at-home dad until she starts school later this year. Like, do the dad stuff until wife gets off work, and then when she gets off work, it's like go. Try to get eight hours in, 10 if I've got a big project. Sometimes a project doesn't take that long. Sometimes a map will take me, an hour and a half, 2 hours. That's pretty rare, but those maps are always nice because that frees up all that extra time to do something else. Just gotta find the time, I guess. It's there. You just gotta look for it. Eke it out of other stuff. It sounds
like you're probably not like binge watching the Great British Baking Show or anything like that.
Oh no, I don't watch I haven't watched TV in a long time. I can't think of like I try to stay about a year behind on movies. So like what Star Wars movie just came out, Rogue One. I'll see that this Christmas instead of whatever's coming out this Christmas. But there's not a whole lot of TV shows that excite me. I don't play computer games almost at all. Like, I really like Minecraft, and every couple of months I'll sit down for 30 hours without sleeping or eating, and I'll play that. But mostly, like, I love creativity. I love being creative. I love the creative process. So when I'm doing something that has no creative input, I hate it and I don't do it. So like TV, I just can't sit still enough to watch it. Movies are a little different. That's like fun time to hang out with the wife and watch movies. But for the most part, my hobby is also my job. I'm lucky in that regard. So like free time is work time, and those don't detract from one another,
Well, it sounds like you're doing an amazing thing. You're raising your daughter, and you are working and just not sleeping, I guess, and working super, super hard. And these maps are amazing. And in fact,
Thanks,
you mentioned you think you have a unique style. So I think before we close out, let's talk a little bit about your sort of unique style. What do you think makes it unique?
So do you know who Perry Race is? In case you don't, or the listener doesn't.
Yeah. Hit it up because our listeners may not know.
He was me not knowing. 16th century Turkish admiral who is also pretty well known for his cartography. And his main thing, the Piri Reis map, the thing he's most famous for, is a really old, like highly accurate map of the world. Basically shows in the middle of it's the Atlantic Ocean. On one side is Africa and Europe. Like you can see France and Iberia or Spain in it. And on the other side is like a pretty like crappy rendition of North America, but an extremely accurate coastline of South America. But it also has what some people say is Antarctica in it with no ice on it. So there's this like huge conspiracy theory that aliens told Piri Reis what was going on or showed him something,
Wow.
One of those like aliens things. But he has all these other maps that he did that are gorgeous, just beautiful maps with like he just uses a unique amount of colors and style. And if you look at his maps, you'll see they're not picture perfect, but they're a step above maps that had been drawn up until then, like medieval maps and things like that. And his like combination of color and placement like really influences what I do. So I think that like my style comes from sort of imitating the way that Perry Race did his maps with that sort of Tolkien style. It's what a lot of people call it, that classic fantasy style. I try to mix up using like really bold, unnaturally unique colors in my maps with that sort of fantasy style. And then I think that on top of the fact that I use traditional mediums, like I use really thick paper for most of my maps to give them a lot of texture, I think that like builds the uniqueness of my style.
Yeah, I'm looking at them right now. This is very reminiscent of the work that you do. That's awesome. And I also love you've got a lot of really cool on your maps, like little icons that I think fit in well with, particularly with Shadow of the Demon Lord. That there's almost like a dark comedic sensibility to some of the things that you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is awesome. So if people want to check out your maps, they want to check out your work, they want to check out your game design stuff, where should they go? What should they do?
So I'm pretty much everywhere. I'm on Facebook, but that's private. But you can find me on Twitter and Google Plus and Tumblr and my website. And most of that is all Sword Peddler. So like my website is swordpeddler.com. I'm swordpeddler.tumblr.com. I'm at Sword Peddler on Twitter. On Google Plus, I'm just Cecil Howe, but I'm all over the place. My website is where I keep like my portfolio, but I'm really bad at updating my website. Like I basically only post things on there when I get an email reminding me to pay for my hosting. But there's stuff there. That's where I keep some of my better ideas. But yeah, I'm all over the place. I'm in all the regular places.
Well, I'd love to have you back on. Maybe we can get you and maybe Dyson's wants to come on the show and have like a map
that would be
jam.
Great. Dyson Logos is the best person ever in role playing games. He's awesome. When I started doing maps, I emailed him and I was like, "Hey, this guy wants to commission some work for me, and I know you do this." Like I didn't know Dyson at that point. It was like a total cold email. I was like, how do I be a map guy who commissions or does commissions? And he answered all my questions, and he's super cool. We've been pretty good friends since. Dyson's the best. He's the best.
Yeah, and he creates opportunities for people. He puts maps out there for free for people to use. So, he's great. I'd love to have you both on the show because I think you're both just amazing creators and amazing people. Cecil, thank you so much for joining me on Tabletop Babble today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Tabletop Babble is still a new show, and the best way to help it grow is to help others find it by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your podcatching platform of choice is. To encourage you to do just that, I'm reading one new 5-star review verbatim each episode and crediting the person who left it. Make me say anything you want. Today's review comes from Susan Carthun in Canada. Her review is entitled Superb, and it is short and sweet and amazing. She says, excellent audio, guests, conversations, and gaming topics. More please, Kay, thanks, bye. That is all it takes, people, to go leave us a 5-star review. Please do it. We would so appreciate it. And if you want to support the show financially, there's an easy way to do that doesn't cost you anything extra. Before you go to Amazon or DriveThruRPG, go to our website, don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com, and click on the banners on the left. Heck, bookmark them and make it easy on yourself. Then just shop as you normally would. It costs you nothing extra and throws a few pennies on the dollar our way to help cover the costs of making the show. Okay, people, you can find out about everything I do on Twitter at James Introcaso or on my website, worldbuilderblog.me. Don't forget to go to don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com to find more awesome shows like Game O'Clock, Venture Maidens, and the DM's Deep Dive. Tabletop Babble is a new show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Special thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Until next time, remember that RPGs are like sex. If everyone's having fun, you're doing it right.